Well, welcome back to the Capital Properties Podcast. My guest today is no stranger to the Lansing, mid-Michigan real estate investing market, as well as in Nashville, Tennessee in the last few years. He's a husband, father, real estate investor, and sole owner in Spartan Properties here in Lansing, Michigan. A buyer and remodeler of single and multi-family homes in mid-Michigan and the Nashville area. Brent Wheeler, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Tim. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Brent, anybody here in mid-Michigan who's somewhat involved in real estate investing has probably had a run-in with your name or who you are. For those folks in Nashville and or the Lansing mid-Michigan area, can you tell a little bit about who you are, if you could give a little bit of your background?
Yeah, I originally started, I guess, in the real estate world as a loan officer back in 2005, 2006, when it was really easy to give everyone a loan. And I'm partially to blame for the fall of that in 2007, 2008. But after that, I got started. I was actually in the reverse mortgage industry for 7.5 years, and I was a tax and insurance default manager.
Okay.
I bought my single family first house in 2009. I started buying rental properties in 2010. And then as a tax manager, I saw we've actually lost a property to tax foreclosure. It was a $300,000 house that we lost over a bid of $9,000, and that perked my ears up to it's like, wait, this guy owns this house for that amount of money. And so I started learning more about tax foreclosures, started going to tax foreclosures in Michigan, which is a tax deed state, and started buying those pretty cheaply. And in 2015 is when I quit my job and started becoming a real estate investor full time. And
Nice.
been doing that ever since.
Do you remember your first purchase, your first real deal of your own as an individual investor?
Yeah, so in 2009, I bought my house. I actually used my student loan money. I was going back to Michigan State, and I got a loan to go to Michigan State, signed up for a bunch of classes, and then canceled those classes and got a refund. That was my deposit to put down on the house. So it was probably not the right way to do that, but yeah, I bought my first house and I house hacked it. Immediately had a roommate move into one of the bedrooms. Shortly after, I had a second roommate, and they were essentially paying me to live there. And so I house hacked that. And in 2010, buddy and I joined forces, and we bought a house for an amazing price of $30,000. And it was a 4-bedroom, 2-bath house, and we overpaid it by about $15,000, believe it or not, back in 2010. But we fixed it up. We rented it out some other friends to us for $1,200 a month, and just kept doing it year after year after year after that.
What were your margins like? What'd your ARV end up being, and what was your margins like in that first deal?
Oh gosh, I mean, back in that time,
did you come up on top? Were you in the black or the red?
No, I mean, yeah, it's hard to say in 2010 because, I mean, there was houses going for $10 in Lansing back in 2010. So, I think after fixing it up, we probably could have sold it for like 40, 50K, but it was slim margins. But we were in it for the rental income off that, and we ended up buying a second house a year later. Then he had different goals of what I wanted to do, so we actually ended up splitting the houses, and I kept the house as a rental for a few years,
Nice.
Which led me to deal with another partner that we bought a duplex across the street using that deal. So it was a pretty good property, and then I ended up selling it later on, I think for $75,000, $80,000. So when you combine the rental income and the equity growth, it turned out pretty well.
One of the more interesting things about you, and those who are in your close circle know this, but I think one of the interesting things about you is that you actually live in Nashville, Tennessee area, but you run a business there and here in mid-Michigan. Can you
That's
talk a little bit about, as we talked about prior to the pod today, you and I, can you tell a little bit about how you came about being in Nashville, if you would, and we'll get a little bit more into the specifics from there.
Yeah, so when I quit my job in 2015, immediately after, I bought 7 one-way tickets to some major US cities that were in growth of real estate. Nashville happened to be the first one, but that wasn't of interest to me because at that time Nashville wasn't known what Nashville is now.
Right.
Back in 2015, real estate in Nashville was actually still pretty cheap. You could still buy houses in Nashville for like 50 grand, like you could in Lansing. But it was the cheapest plane ticket to get to North Carolina. So I flew to Nashville for a few days, spent a few days here, just kind of having fun and going around, but I had no interest in Nashville whatsoever. And then after I went to North Carolina, Phoenix, Houston, Denver, San Diego, Los Angeles, after comparing all those markets, those were relatively like expensive at the time. And so when I sat back and looked and saw what was going on in Nashville, saw the price point, that's what made me take a second look at Nashville. So I ended up driving down about 3 months after my first visit. And I found like, okay, there's actually a lot going on in Nashville, and the price point is still really inexpensive. That I could see the growth of what Nashville was going to happen. I didn't predict exactly that it was going to like triple and quadruple in some cases, but I could definitely see that it was kind of like in the early Austin phase, and that's what kind of drew me to it.
Nice, nice. Hindsight's 2020, but of those other 7, is there any others that stood out that you really wish you would have maybe looked at as well?
I mean, I really loved Austin. And I met an investor there who was doing new build projects, and I still talk to her occasionally, but at the time she wasn't. Had she given me an opportunity to come work for her and learn that business, I probably would have moved to Austin.
Yeah.
But at that time she wasn't ready to take on. My wife and I went there a couple of years ago, and I met up with her, and she actually did have that kind of an apprentice guy with her doing that. And I told him, I was like, you're lucky that she didn't offer me this, years ago, because I would have jumped on it. But yeah, I really liked Austin. I mean, any of those markets. I mean, Charlotte's blown up. Everything in Texas has blown up. Denver has done really well. Phoenix has done really well. So, I mean, I don't think I would have been wrong to go in any of those cities. Maybe Los Angeles, I probably not as much, but I think anyone who's doing real estate since 2015 in any of those cities probably did pretty well.
How are the markets different just in general, between Nashville and, let's say, mid-Michigan, Lansing, East Lansing, mid-Michigan? For just real quickly, just generally speaking, in terms of the investing mindset, where do you find that people invest more in real estate? And then we can get a little bit more into the specifics. What are some of the philosophical differences?
It's interesting actually, because Lansing, I'm starting to see Lansing actually tick upwards, whereas I'm starting to see Nashville kind of plateau a little bit.
Okay.
Where like I think last time I looked, Lansing had less than 300 houses on the market or somewhere around there. Yep. Nashville, obviously, it's a bigger area, so you're going to have more. But where I see stuff in Lansing now, they're usually under contract in less than a week, whereas Nashville, you're starting to see stuff, 2 weeks, 3 weeks in some cases. But going back a few years, Nashville exploded to the point where people were offering $50,000-$60,000 over asking, and you weren't necessarily getting that in Lansing. Yes, there were over asking prices, but it wasn't to that extreme. So price points are different. I would say Nashville on average has a $450,000 price range average, whereas Lansing is maybe 200, if less than that. I'm not sure what the exact markets are, but so yeah, it's a different price point. And as far as like tax deeds and mortgage foreclosures, it's a different they're opposite of each other. So Michigan's a tax deed state, so when taxes get foreclosed on, goes to auction, you get the deed to the property immediately. Whereas in Tennessee, there's a 1-year redemption when it goes to a tax foreclosure. However, in Tennessee, when you sign for a mortgage, you waive your right to a redemption in most cases. So when they go to the auction blocks for a mortgage foreclosure, if you are the highest bidder, you're getting the deed to the property right then and there. Whereas in the state of Michigan, mortgage foreclosures have a 6 months and sometimes up to a year redemption period. So they're just opposite of each other when it comes to that, and that's where we kind of specialize in investing, is tax foreclosures and mortgage foreclosures.
How do you handle the logistics? Are you back in mid-Michigan often, Brent, or do you have an office manager or staff there? Talk to me a little bit about that.
So I have a portfolio of homes that are short-term rentals in Lansing, and I do have, because I essentially lived there my entire life and was investing for a long time, I have all my contractors that I like to work with.
Yeah.
So I have electricians, plumbers, HVAC guys, roofers, siding, and general contractors that can handle things that pop up or the type of rehab that we're in. I do travel back about once every 3 to 4 months, just to kind of check on things, to make improvements. But for the most part, with our short-term rentals, we have our processes in place that it's really easy to manage. Everything's done online, either through Airbnb, VRBO, or our website, capitalcityvacay.com. And we have a back-end system, so it handles all the communications to the guests, check-in procedures, checkout procedures, payment collection procedures, collecting security deposits, getting people's IDs. Like, very rarely do I actually have to communicate with guests. So
nice. When you first began, let's say a decade ago or plus, what were some of the early lessons as an investor, trying to bring value to those inexperienced investors nowadays, Brent, who are in that position? What were some of the early lessons that really stand out? Was it crews? Was it people? Was it the monies and funding? What were some of the early lessons that you learned that really stood out to you that made a difference?
When we first started out, we were just trying to do everything ourselves to cut cost. I think I've probably painted 30 different houses at this point in time, and I've gotten really good at painting. But now that I'm in the position that I'm at now, we have a really good painter who she's probably done our last 4 or 5 flips here in Nashville, and in our own primary residence. She's just better, quicker, just does an overall better quality job in a faster time frame. So when you can leverage other people's experiences and qualities, that's huge. So I know a little bit about construction work, but I'm not a contractor. So if you can hire someone else to go and do the drywall and things like that, plumbing, electrical, and just essentially, if you can utilize other people's time, it's gonna save you in the long run. So someone once told me, actually, it was the investor out in Austin, whether you get someone cheap or get someone who's quality work, you're gonna pay for it either way. So if you can find someone who does good quality work in a relatively quick time, it's worth paying them the money to do so.
For those folks who are interested in getting into investing, Brent, of course, to be able to front the cash and buy a home, that would be great. But let's say somebody's interested in getting into investing. They're willing to pick up, a house under $100,000. They want to do the rehab on it. Let's just say, it needs light to medium rehab, not down to the studs or anything, but they're just looking to get their feet wet into investing. What route would you say for them to take if they don't have the cash? Talk just briefly about, and generally speaking, what would you tell them to do to get funding for that project?
That's hard as a newbie investor because for someone who's brand new, it's going to take longer than you thought, and it's going to cost more than you thought, and that's just because they don't know any better. So for new people, I would strongly recommend teaming up with someone who's doing what it is that you want to do. If it's flipping find somebody else who's flipping and just ask to kind of shadow them along and see if they'll share what the expenses are and what the timeframes are to get something done. But if you're getting started and you can get bank financing if you have a job, W-2 job. It won't be hard to get a bank loan. But most people are going to need either a hard money loan or private money lender from a friend or family to get started. But it's right now, flipping is, I guess, been the hot topic for the last few years, and everybody sees HGTV and thinks it's easy and they can make six figures on a flip, and that's just not the case.
Yeah. Those monies can go real quick in the budget, and you really just, as much of the work as you can do on your own, and as much of the cost that you can mitigate, the better off you're going to be. I know MSU, FCU, I know DART, they, I believe, have programs for not, of course, the conventional loan, but they do have programs also. We don't need to get into it right now, but for the rehab costs and otherwise as you progress into the game.
Yeah. I think they do. We had generally we try to base stuff off square footage of a house in my experience. Right now, if it's just carpet and paint or just flooring and paint and just strictly cosmetic stuff, that's even running us about $10 a square foot. That's just the cost of everything right now. So it's really hard to find a deal that's just carpet and paint. We did one last year and it was actually really profitable. But yeah, it's really hard to find just a cosmetic flip.
Can you share a little bit about what do you find is not only the most satisfying, but sometimes the most frustrating parts of investing as a whole, Brent? And if you were to say to somebody, if somebody were to ask you, what do you find the most satisfying part about real estate investing? What would you tell them? Besides the monies.
Right.
In business.
I like the flexibility of the time. I always knew from a younger age I wanted to have my own business, and eventually when I got started, I could see that this would be a way to replace my income versus going to work in a regular job, a 9-to-5 job. Eventually wanted to have a family and have kids to spend time with them. So that's the rewarding side for me, is that I take my kids to school Monday and Wednesday, or their Mother's Day Out program. I have signed up to be my son's soccer coach, and I'm coaching. I use that term lightly. I'm chasing 3-year-olds around a field to try to keep them on the field. But so having that flexibility, and I can see, within 4 to 5 years when they're in elementary school, or all of them will be in elementary school, I'll have the freedom and flexibility to do that. We just got back from Sarasota for a spring break vacation. We have 2 other vacations planned this summer with the family. So that's the rewarding side for me, is just having freedom of time.
How about frustration? What's some of your biggest frustrations in your projects?
I'm actually standing in our most recent flip, and it was a huge it was quite a big renovation. It took quite a while. Down here in Nashville, my biggest frustrations are typically with contractors. It is the communication, or lack thereof, sometimes is I'm also to blame for this, but also on their end is communicating of when they're going to be, what the costs are going to be, when it's going to be done. And I need to do a better job of kind of managing the contractors down here. I don't have that issue so much in Lansing because I have a really good relationship with everybody.
Right.
But it's been a struggle to find really good contractors down here. So.
Is the weather, I'm just a side question, is the weather warm enough down there where it makes a difference in terms of turnaround time?
Yes. Well, especially in the winter. I mean, if you have to get siding on a house in Lansing in the midst of January, it's really hard to convince guys to go put siding on. Nashville weather, I would say probably you get an extra 2 months of better weather down here than you do up in Michigan. It does get cold down here. I mean, the first time I came to Nashville, it was 7 degrees. It was actually colder in Nashville than it was in Lansing at the time. So it does get cold. We do get snow, but we get snow for 5 days and it goes away and then we're done. So, but yeah, it definitely can make a huge difference.
What trait do you find in yourself, Brent, that's really ramped up over the years of investing that you find is you're probably one of your you gotta have it, not one of your better traits, but just you have to have it in the game of investing? Patience. What would you say?
Yeah, you definitely need to have patience. My wife will tell you I probably lack that, especially when I get frustrated with contractors. But if you can learn to find a niche in finding a deal that works, whether it's residential or commercial, whether it's single family or multifamily, if you can find a way to continually go after a certain type of deal, I think you're always going to be set up for success. Like if you're really good at handling foreclosures or contacting people who are going to be facing foreclosure, and you can help them out of that situation and save their credit or take it over subject to, or whatever the case may be, there's always going to be a need for that. But yeah, patience is good. Communication is great. If you're a great communicator, just setting up simple things like tasks, and kind of like a step by step, thing, just organization, I
Yep.
think would be huge.
Yep.
Any of those would be really helpful for any investor. So if you find someone who lacks those things and you can step in and help as a newbie, I would support that all day.
Nice. Well, Brent, I appreciate this more than you know. If folks want to reach out to you, how can they get a hold of Brent Wheeler to talk to them about investing? I know I've reached out to you when I first came to Lansing. You were more than cordial to offer any help that I needed. If folks want to get a hold of you and you have the time, how can they get a hold of you?
Yeah, I'm pretty easy. You can find me on Facebook. I'm all over the Lansing Real Estate Investors page, Facebook group. So you can just send me a message on there. You can email me at spartanprop, prop number 1 at gmail.com. But yeah, I usually have my phone on me just because I deal with all the short-term rentals. So just in case something pops up, I need to have access to it. But yeah, I'm generally around Nashville real estate meetup groups, and occasionally going to the Lansing ones when I can make it up there. But I'm always available on the Facebook group page.
So nobody's trying to teach you the lyrics to Rocky Top or anything like that, right?
No, I'm always going to be a Michigan State alumni. So I will say, University of Tennessee campus is actually quite beautiful. We did drive down to Knoxville one day and stroll through it. So it is a beautiful campus, but doesn't quite beat Michigan State's campus.
Cheer
Sorry.
your green and white on starting this
Yeah.
week.
Yeah, I know. Thursday morning, big game. So Mississippi State and Michigan State. So one MSU team will win. Hopefully it's the green and white one.
Yeah, amen. Amen.
Yeah.
Brent, thanks for your time. I appreciate this more than you know.
I appreciate it, Tim.
We'll talk to you
Talk to you
soon.
soon.
You
Yep.
bet. Take care. Thank you, sir.
Bye.
Bye-bye.